A travel podcast? About what country? What should we talk about? Well, we're today going to talk about a country that not many people discuss. It's hardly in podcasts. It's not on YouTube. We're going to talk about Italy. Wheels up.
We're gonna be two hearts running wild.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Meander Travel Podcast. You just heard my husband, Tony, and I am Julie. And we are going to share some information with you today about Italy. And I know he made a little joke about it being a very unknown travel destination, but we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We are not going to tell you about every nook and cranny in Italy and where you should stay and what you should do. We're actually going to tell you what happened to us while we were in Italy. I would say that our trip was one of those things where we were in the right place at the right time for a bunch of different things, at least 5 separate times we had something kind of cool happen to us. And it really made us rethink the way we want to do things. We had an epiphany and realized that it's the experiences that make travel really, really cool. And now we kind of say that we would like to be in search of experiential travel. So we're going to talk about 5 different places and things that happened to us, and we'll give you some more information about that.
And in experiential travel, everybody has experiences on their trips. Like,
True.
You're always going to have them. But, you know, when you plan a trip and you go, oh, I want to go see the Eiffel Tower and I want to see Big Ben, and those are things that you want to go and do and mark them off a list. Well, those are the same thing everybody does. Now, we do those too. We love those as well. But the experiences are more something that you are partaking in that is unique, something different, that the way we're thinking about these experiences, something that most people do not know about because they didn't even know existed unless they just happened upon it, which we did multiple times on this trip. So now we go about it differently. Now we look for those
And
things.
they're actually the things that we remember.
Totally.
So you might remember seeing the Eiffel Tower for the first time, but you're not maybe emotionally connected to it. But when you get involved in a cultural thing that you're wrapped up into, you come home, and we were so excited to tell those stories from our trip. And it wasn't, oh, we saw the Eiffel Tower. It was like, oh my gosh, you will not believe what happened to us. It was amazing. It was really super cool. So let's jump into the first thing that started or that happened to us on the Cinque Terre in Italy.
And why don't you explain to them where that is?
The Cinque Terre is a region in Liguria, Italy, which is on the northwestern coast. It's 5 towns, actually, and they're all connected. They have a train track that runs behind the towns, but otherwise, you have to hike between the towns if you really want to get yourselves between them. And the 5 of them together are protected under the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, so they're not allowed to have vehicles that are
No cars allowed in the towns.
Yep.
You have to park your vehicles. If you're going to drive to the Cinque Terre, you have to park your car up like at the top of a mountain/hill, and you have to carry all your bags from there down into the towns because there's no cars allowed in the towns. So you either travel from train. Well, let's back up a little bit and talk about getting to Italy because there's a little tip there that a lot of people don't think of. When people talk about traveling to Italy, they're going to do a search from their hometown to Rome. Everybody looks for Rome. Well, we flew into Pisa, and Pisa, Milan,
from Minneapolis.
Yeah, from Minneapolis. Pisa, Milan, Florence. There's a lot of towns that have international airports. So if you just look for Rome, you're going to be pigeonholed into probably one of the most expensive flights there are to Italy. Now, it might be cheaper, but look around. Start your trip somewhere different. We started Pisa because we stayed in Tuscany and then ended in Rome. We'll get to that. But when we fly into Pisa, it was so much cheaper as a fly into Pisa and out of Rome. So look at those combinations of flying into not just a round trip into one spot, but a multi-city destination, and it might be way cheaper.
Yeah,
So,
if you actually do a Google search, you can set it to a multi-city destinations.
on Google Flights.
Yeah, it's really easy to do, and you'd be surprised that sometimes a multi-city flight is going to save you money over a direct flight, and it's going to put you closer to where you're going in and out of.
Yeah, where you really want to begin.
Super handy.
So we flew into Pisa, and from there we immediately jumped on a train with some difficulty. We were learning a train because that's the only way to get into the Cinque Terre if you don't have a car, and we didn't want to rent a car yet. So we took a train did not validate our tickets, and because we were just getting to the station at the last second. And that's difficult because when you get to the train stations, you buy your ticket, you validate it, get on so that when they come and check you, it's a valid ticket. That's a tip as well.
We didn't do that. We got
didn't do
super
that.
lucky.
We got super lucky because
Nobody checked us.
if the conductor had come along, we would have had like a 40 or 50 euro fine for each ticket. And it's like a $5 ticket to go to the Cinque Terre from Pisa. So it's not expensive. But then know what your stop is. It's in a foreign language. Make sure you get off at the right spot. And we did. We got it off at Vernazza. So now you can continue on. Sorry.
I will also say that we had very large suitcases.
Yes.
We packed the house. And now we were gone. It was a long trip, and we had different
2.5
shoes.
weeks.
And I don't know, we wanted our comforts from home
Big
or something.
roller suitcases. They were big rectangles and heavy. 50
And it's the
plus
worst
pounds.
country to take a giant suitcase like that to it. Poor Tony
And
had
we'll explain
to,
a little in a second here as to why.
Yeah, it was terrible.
So we went to Vernazza. We had planned 3-night stay in Vernazza, and that's one of the middle towns. It's actually the first to the top, the most northern one. And then we had 3 nights at an Airbnb that we had booked right on the plaza, right on the water, in the heart of Vernazza.
Had the most amazing view. We had this
Balcony
balcony, but you did have to carry those heavy suitcases up 73 steps
73 tight, narrow hallway,
above your head.
spiraling staircase, basically. And I had to do one, go back down, and get the other one because, no offense, Julie just couldn't carry that thing up 73
I could get
steps.
it one step at a time, but that was about it.
So, tip again, if you're going to travel and stay in the Airbnbs, know their layouts of how you're going to, if there's no elevators, there was no elevator, or backpack suitcase type thing so you can put it on your back and carry it because the wheeled suitcase with just a handle was a bugger.
We have now become backpack people, and we might talk about that more in other podcasts. But yeah, we're learning to be backpack people. Big
Yes.
backpacks, mind you. They're heavy, but
So Vernazza.
so Vernazza. So our first night there, it was so lovely, and we were so happy to be there, and we couldn't believe the gorgeous views and how wonderful everything was. And we went down to get dinner. And our first misadventure, I would say, is that we did, before we went to Italy, practice diligently on our Duolingo. Maybe me a little bit more than Tony. And I got all cocky because we ordered a pizza. I was pretty
Sausage pizza.
pretty sure that I was ordering a sausage pizza because I'd learned those words. Well, the pizza came and it had cut up hot dogs on it.
Hot dogs, not sausage, straight up like Oscar Mayer, hot dogs
Yep.
cut into like little tiny franks and
I mean,
thrown on top of the
surprisingly,
pizza.
it was pretty good, but it was definitely a fail. We
Not
needed
what
to
we
do
expected.
a little bit better. That's actually not one of those things that was a right place, right time kind of
That's
thing.
not the epiphany moment.
Just a funny story. But later on that evening, we were strolling the streets after dinner, which is what all Italians do. It's called the passeggiata, which is actually a word that has become part of our family's vernacular. And even our dog, Dilly, who we mentioned in our opening podcast, knows what it means because we take a passeggiata every night after dinner.
We say, and we're done with dinner, we sit there and we go, hey, Dilly, want to go on a passeggiata? And she runs for the door. So she knows
It's
that
so
we're going to go for
cute.
an evening stroll.
It's so cute. So we were on our evening stroll that night with a lot of other Italians, the little old nanas that are out with their friends. It's an opportunity for the neighbors to congregate, talk about the day, the fishermen to talk about their catch, what have you.
It is a fishing village,
It is a
a
fishing.
working fishing village.
It is, yeah. But this evening, we found a nice table with a glass of wine, and there was, well, actually, leading up to that, we heard some music, which is why we
Up an
kind
alleyway.
of turned down an alleyway and sat at this little table, and there was 3 men playing guitar, but one of them had just a really deep, beautiful voice, and you could kind of tell that he was really good. He
was
he
professional.
wasn't just, anybody.
And we sat down and there was people sitting on the steps nearby, kind of listening. But we were like, who is this guy? What? He was the owner of the restaurant. His name was Piva. And come to find out, he was a well-known regional guy that sings in their regional language. It's not straight up Italian. It's like this, little off-brand
It's a-
Italian of fishermen. This is what they speak when they
Some
go
other
out on the
dialect,
boats. It's a
yeah.
really unique dialect. And we couldn't understand it anyways, but it was really lovely to hear him and his friends playing while we got served dinner. And we were like, we're the only ones here and we have this private concert. But they weren't playing for us. They were just playing for themselves, sitting out there, and we're like, this is really cool.
But they did offer us to buy their CD.
Yes, we did, which we did.
We
we
did.
bought their CD. I think we've listened to it a couple times.
We have.
Right when we got home.
It brings back the memories. But it was a lovely evening, and we just happened to be at the right place and the right time to be able to experience this semi-famous guy that doesn't do that every evening. I think that was kind of a special occasion, and that's why people were kind of congregating there, because it isn't something that he did all the time.
Right.
It was
And-
kind of a treat.
And that's not something that we would be able to plan for in the future. It's just like, it was one of those moments where we thought, wow, we're in the right place at the right
We're very
time.
lucky.
And that started a snowball of getting some of those experiences. Another one that was kind of cool in Vernazza that, we weren't even going to plan on talking, but I just wanted to remind you. I was swimming. I wanted to go in the water so bad because I have a little passion for swimming in different seas. So people collect sand or stones from when they travel around the world, I collect seas. I'm going to jump in.
Not the actual water.
No, I'm not going to collect it and bring it home, but I collect swimming in seas. Odd thing to collect, but wherever I travel, I'm going to swim in the sea if it's a sea that I haven't swam in.
He was born and raised on a lake, so he's very attached to water. So it means something to him
Yep.
to be able to dive into, even if it's super, super cold.
Yes. So on this day, when we got there that day, I was out swimming off the rocks on their harbor, border wall, and it was getting pretty dark, starting to almost start to rain, and all of a sudden the fisherman, there's this old fisherman, he was going out and is retrieving some of these wood old boats, and he was bringing them onto the shore, and then he was struggling to roll them up the logs, like in the old days, rolling up the boat on its keel up these logs, up the sand beach, into the center square of Vernazza. And he was
They're
struggling.
moving like some of the tables with the umbrellas so they could bring
Restaurants
the
were
boats in.
moving their stuff, and I'm sitting in the water swimming like lollygagging. And I said, "Hey, would you like some help?" To which he understood what I was asking, and he and I hauled in about 5 or 6 boats up off the beach, out of the water, swim them into the shore, bring them up onto the beach, roll them up these logs, and putting them in the center square. And I'm like, I just helped fishermen, secure their boats. It was really kind of a fun thing to do. Not something you expect to do.
Well, you kind of get the feeling like if you lived there, this would be the pattern of your life. This is what you would do. There's a storm coming. It's like all hands on deck. Everybody goes down to help out. And he was pretty old.
Yeah.
He
was strong, though.
He needed
He was
you.
stronger than me, probably.
Wiry.
Yep.
Old man
Been doing
strength.
it his whole life. So that's in Vernazza. One more thing about Vernazza.
Well, this is the real story.
No. One more.
Oh, okay.
Because one thing that we love, and we mentioned it in our very opening credits of our first episode of our Who We Are, gelato. We learned something about gelato
Twice a day.
at least if you're in Italy because you're walking all day.
You burn it off.
But we learned by going into a little shop there because we spent 3 days in Vernazza. You get to know the people and the little cafes, and
It's not that big.
it's not that big. But we went into a gelato shop and we talked to the guy that makes the gelato. And when you're in Rome and you may see these like, oh my gosh, look at those bright neon colors and beautiful displays of gelato, and you're like, oh my gosh, it looks great. Those are not the ones to eat.
Stay away.
Stay away from
They're
them.
not authentic.
So the authentic ones are kind of dull. They're just natural flavors, natural colorings. They don't puff them up and make them all fancy. It's just like lop them off at the top of the tray, and that's what you're going to get scooped. Well, we started talking to this guy, and he's like explaining, because we love pistachio gelato. It's a great flavor.
It's the best.
And that's the area for pistachios. And he sources the pistachios fresh. And if he doesn't have fresh pistachios, he's not making pistachio gelato. So his pistachio gelato was brand new, fresh, with the best pistachios that he could find. And we've never, since that day, ever had as good a pistachio gelato. But we learned, go for the ugly, gross
Not
green.
ugly per se, but just not as neon.
It's not pretty.
Colorful.
It looks like a drab, a light drab army green ice cream, and that's the pistachio gelato you got to look for. All right,
Yeah.
moving on.
So anyway, the really cool thing that happened to us while we were in the Cinque Terre. So we were having breakfast one morning, and right next to us on this wall was a flyer and it was a picture of a pirate, and it said Dragut on it.
We
And
could read Dragut because it was Dragut, but we couldn't understand anything.
We couldn't
else
read the
on
rest of it.
rest of
We could see a date on there maybe,
which was
And
that night. It was for that night or the next
it was the next night.
And we're like, what is this?
Yeah, we had asked somebody, what the heck is this? And they said, oh, it's in Monterosso. The next town over is it's like a festival. I'm like, oh, festival. that's kind of cool. Like, that's good timing. We don't have any plans tomorrow night. We'll
We're here
go
for
do
3
that.
days. Let's go.
So awesome. So the next day we got up and we had planned on hiking to Monte Rosso anyway.
Yep.
So we did the hike, which is spectacular, by the way, and not for the faint of heart. Like,
And let's talk about that for a second, because when people talk about going to the Cinque Terre, what it's really intended for is, this is a medieval town. There's 5 medieval towns. They didn't have trains. They didn't have cars. There was footpaths, trails into the rock and into the dirt and across rivers and streams from each town up and down the coast. And that's how they would get to and from each other's towns all the time. So these guys are like billy goats. They are constantly walking up and down mountains to get from one
and
town
the
to the next.
elevation is pretty significant.
Yes, it's very significant. So we had a very adventurous hike to get to Monte Rosso.
We had thought that we would go back to our hotel after hiking to Monte Rosso to change into something more appropriate for a festival. And we quickly realized, oh, heck no. We're just going to have to be in our shorts and our T-shirt and
Little sweaty.
with our beach bag, because there's no way we're doing that again.
Right. So
And
when we
even
get-
schlepping by the train is just kind of a lot of work. So by the time we got there, we were ready to have some cocktails on the beach and watch the festivities. But what we got to see that night was far different than
Spectacular.
anything we could have imagined.
and something that we wouldn't have known. We didn't know about. We just kind of were in Vernazza and we saw a flyer. So we get to Monte Rosso and we walk around and we bar hop a little bit and have a cocktail. And then we all realize that we have to go, and we see people walking through the streets setting stuff up. So to give you a little background as to what this is, and I don't know the dates, maybe Julie has them and knowledgeable
I do,
about-
actually.
All right. Explain what Dragut was and what this reenactment is.
Okay, so Dragut was a Turkish pirate, and he would invade towns all over the world, but particularly up and down the Italian coastline. And in 1544, on July 8th, he invaded the town of Monte Rosso. And the townspeople typically had an alarm system to alert everybody that the pirate was coming, and they would go head for the hills or take shelter, whatever. On this particular day, this auspicious day in July 8th of 1544, their alarm system, for whatever reason, somebody fell asleep on the job and it didn't work. So a bunch of the townspeople holed themselves up in the little church that they had, which turned out to be not a great idea, because when the Turkish pirate sailed his pirate ship into the harbor, all of the young men jumped off the ship, came into town, couldn't get into the church where they knew the people were, so they burned it down with the people
Great
inside.
story, Julie. This is fun.
I'm sorry,
A
this
little
is
morbid.
true history. And then they went running through the town, looting and pillaging, and then capturing men and women and taking
Mostly
them
women.
as
Taking the women.
well, slaves. They would take the men for slaves and women for, we don't need to go there. But anyway, this town of Monte Rosso, every summer, they reenact.
They reenact the whole thing.
Yeah.
They bring in a pirate ship off the shoreline. Well, before that, we're in town, we're walking around, and they're bringing in reeds, like from swamps, reeds.
Like
and
palm fronds
Palm
and
frond
stuff.
reeds. And they're putting them everywhere. They're lining the streets. They're covering up businesses. They're making it look like as if this was back in, 15, what'd you say?
1544.
Okay, 1500s. It looked like as if these pirates were going to come ashore, and they're going through the town, and it had it was supposed to look like it. They didn't want to see like, oh, here's a McDonald's. What there isn't a McDonald's, but you know what I mean. They didn't
Yeah.
want to see storefronts.
Right.
So they get this town ready for hours beforehand, and then when it starts to get dark, they wait till it gets dark, because when they come in, there's fire, there's cannons, these guys are their boat comes into the harbor, and we're sitting on the shoreline watching with hundreds of other people, and it's mayhem. These guys, it was like a full-on riot.
It was kind of scary. It was like,
It was.
oh my gosh, we're being attacked.
These guys jump off the railings of their boats, they come ashore, and they act like they start grabbing women.
And they're dressed like pirates.
Yep.
They have the fluffy white
Yep.
shirt and the
Now they're
black
soaking wet.
pants, and they're holding like machetes or swords. I don't know. They're like,
And they had built every year they build a church, and they put it down by the waterfront. It's not exactly
A
right.
wooden-
It's wood, and it's small. It's like, let's say, the size of a room, like a small room.
small shed.
A small shed, and they put a steeple on it, so it's a church. And hypothetically, the people are inside of it.
Yeah, we get the picture.
Recreating it wise, they run through the town, they burn the church, explosions are going off, and as they're running through town, they're grabbing people.
I tried to get
hostage.
grabbed, but I didn't get
Like
grabbed.
they're grabbing women and they're bringing them to the city square, and then everybody in town goes to the city square around this. There's a
Big fountain.
There's a big fountain, and it is the most unbelievable scene with these pirates, and they go through a whole process of reenacting, having them all chained up and all the women chained up, and they're prisoners.
So the
dress.
townspeople really get into it. So they dress the part of whatever they want to be. So some of them dressed as pirates, some of them dressed as just local people of the day, but kind of in really humble clothes. So they made it look like they weren't modern people. And then some of the women dressed in like really scantily clad, fun little outfits. Tony got
was
some
great.
pictures with some of those ladies. But it was amazing to see them all come together. And at one point, the crowd was so large, we lost contact of each other. Like we weren't nearby. And I didn't worry, and I thought to myself, okay, so Tony really likes photography. And I knew he'd be somewhere
With a good
where
view.
he could get a good vantage point so he could get some amazing photos. And sure enough, I look up and he's hanging off a light pole
Yep.
that was nearby.
I was about 10 feet in the air with great views,
Our
good
pictures are
camera
pretty
angles.
cool.
They're pretty cool shots because of that. But I
So
was
then
very
it-
uncomfortable up there. But no one was telling me to get down because it was pretty lawless at that point. You could do anything you wanted in that square because
Yeah, that was the
that was
point.
the whole point.
So when they're all the people are circled around this fountain and they're tied up, and then it culminates with this belly dancer, and she comes in and they have really evocative, kind of cool music, and it's to kind of calm everybody down. And she does this really beautiful dance, and then after that, it's kind of all mayhem and it's drinking and partying and everybody's just having fun.
The women are
but-
freed, and then
Yeah.
they're all mingling with the crowd, and we're talking hundreds of people, not thousands. It's not that big, right? So there's hundreds of people around, and then you sit around talking and get pictures taken with everybody. But it was at that moment we're like, we stumbled upon this. Like, why did we not know about this and plan on going to the Cinque Terre, plan on being in Monte Rosso for that event? Because it was that cool. I mean, it's still cool. It's been a long time, and we're still talking about it like it was yesterday.
I still get excited sharing the story because it was so fun and so interesting. It's amazing, but there's towns all around Italy, just
Everyone
like this,
has a festival.
that celebrate things that happened in their history. They really retain that way more than we do. They have got thousands of years of history, and they bring these things up. And I was looking through photos. There's so many other towns that have little colloquial festivals that honor
And we do that here.
all kinds of things. But
it's different. It's just a
It's
little bit
different.
different. It's more cultural and not like, it's our, whatever festival in our town.
it's hard to describe, but that was the first thing that happened.
That
to
was the
us
big
where we
epiphany
realized, okay, from now on moving forward, when we plan a trip, we're going to figure out, is there anything going on nearby where we're going to be like this so that we can make sure that we catch
Or
something.
do we maneuver our dates so that if we're going to go to two different towns that are 20 miles, 30 miles apart, do we put one of those dates ahead of the other one because there is something going on in that town? So we, want to know what those festivals and activities are.
Right.
So that was one. So
Right.
that's, well, 1 and 2. Meeting Piva was kind of a cool moment, but that is something you don't recreate. That's just in the moment,
That was just
an
lucky.
experience.
Well, they were both lucky.
The Dragut experience was big. That was a big moment for us. And then we left the Cinque Terre, and we went to Collodi. Now, if you're in Tuscany, Collodi is in between Florence and Lucca, or Florence and Pisa and Lucca. It's a hilltop kind of town up in the it's off the highway. Not many people know about it. I'll give you a little reason why you may know it or possibly have heard about it. The character Pinocchio from Disney was written by Carlo Collodi. That's not his given name, but he was named his pen name after the city or the town of Collodi. Small little village. We went there not for any particular reason with Collodi. We went there for ancestral/genealogy. My family originates from Italy, and we knew that we had relatives that had once got married and lived and born and died in Collodi. So we wanted to go there and see it and do a little digging. That's a different episode. We're going to talk about genealogy at a different date because that kind of travel is fun.
I will just say that the cool thing that we got to do is we got to see our grandparents' grave sites.
Yeah.
And that was pretty amazing. But yeah, you're right. That's a whole nother episode that we'll talk about genealogy, but that was a really cool experience.
Because we didn't know anything about that. We just went there with open eyes just to see if we could find anything. We found a lot of cool stuff, and how to do that in the future episode would be pretty cool to discuss. So we find ourselves in Collodi. Actually, we were in a little town called San Gennaro off to the side of Collodi because there was
Up in the hills.
up in the hill, really cool bed and breakfast in a castle. and we found it online, and we're like, well, let's stay here. It was awesome.
Shout out to our friend Dario.
Dario
owner.
and his wife, she's an American, he's Italian, so they spoke very good English. They were the best hosts. But they put us on to certain things down, and he says, hey, first night, go down into Kalodi and have dinner at this restaurant, great pasta. Like, cool, we're going to go down there. We had a car at this point. We picked up a car in Lucca. So we go down to this. The restaurant was okay, but it was great pasta.
It was maybe one of those restaurants that I think might have been owned by his friend.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to go do that. And we had a preemie first, like a big, huge appetizer platter. And there was a lot of stuff on there we couldn't even like determine what it was.
Yeah,
it was,
but so we
it
just
was very
ate.
interesting. But we had the appetizer platter. We had amazing pasta. But as we're sitting there and we are just enjoying our dinner, there's all of these really snappily dressed people.
Snappily.
Snappily.
Is that a word? I like that word.
I
if
think it's a
not.
word.
Okay.
Walking down the street. And we are also hearing music. And so we're wondering, okay, what is going on? So there's music playing somewhere. And if we could
have
hear
not-
it, it was loud.
And we have not investigated this town at all yet. We had
No.
just got down. We were hungry. We went down, got dinner. We're satiated. Now we're ready to, let's walk down and see what this is.
And you know, Italians, when they dress up,
It is
I mean,
so
they
good.
look good.
They look so good.
So we
I'm
were
in-
watching these people.
I'm in
thinking,
Birkenstocks with no, just, we're looking like the American
I
tourists.
mean,
That's
think,
fine.
I think we looked
No. we
casually nice. I don't think we
Casual.
looked like schlubs, but we were not dressed
a little
like
schlubby.
to the nines.
We
like
were
they
schlubby compared to the people that were going to this function.
That's
and
true.
everybody was walking up to this gate with a high wall, and behind it was darkness.
We quickly paid our bill and we're like, we got to go find out what's
Yep.
going on.
So we walked down to the entrance of this gate, and we're like, what's going on here? And somebody could explain it a little in English. There was a function going on at the Garzoni Gardens. Now, we didn't know what that was really at this moment in time, because even when we looked at researching going to Kalodi, we had no idea about the Garzoni Gardens.
No, it's highly underrated and
Totally.
not talked about and absolutely worth a visit. It's not really super convenient if you're not going through this town, but you can make it. So
So
I mean, it's
we
awesome.
can't see the gardens because it's dark. It's nighttime at this point, and they're on a hillside behind this wall. So they're telling us that there's a fashion pageant for Lucca, which is nearby, and all of the surrounding communities are sending their most beautiful dressed women to be in a pageant.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is a great idea. We should go inside. So we pay a little. The
sad thing was-
we asked, can we go in? And they said, yep, we go in, and oh, it was awesome.
Well, the sad thing was the ticket price, which wasn't that bad, but it included dinner and drinks. We're like,
We didn't know
"Oh,
that. So we just
man,
got the cocktail instead.
we just paid for dinner. This probably would have been better, but
So we go inside, and they've got a runway down the gardens, and we can see in the background there's a hillside with some pretty ornate gardens, and it goes up into the darkness where we can't see anymore. They try to have it lit, but it's not great. We're like, wow, we need to come back and see this on another day. So that was another day. But the pageant that night that was happening, we had no idea was going to be happening. And we sat and talked with people we got to become friends with a little bit there. And
we hung out with a young couple, and I remember it because her name was Juliana. So
Yep.
we both Julies.
And they didn't really, they were kind of brought in not really knowing what it was going to be like either. They hadn't been to this before. But it was a full-on, gowns and
It was like the Miss USA
bikinis.
pageant.
Yeah, it was like a Miss USA pageant in the gardens on a runway and through this, through the fountains area. And it was really cool. We were experiencing
It was
something that we
beautiful.
would never have seen if we didn't just stumble upon it.
Yeah.
And then the gardens were so cool looking in the background, we didn't know. So we got to come back tomorrow. So we did.
Yeah.
And we went to this gardens, and it's amazing. It's like a pyramid-shaped, triangular up into the mountain, and there's levels. And every level is a different theme and a different way of doing gardening with fountains and honoring different things, like their enemy cities to Florence to the east and Lucca to the west. They had statues of them, like people representing those towns.
There was labyrinths.
There's
there
bamboo
was
garden-
really
forests.
weird sculptures.
grottos.
Grottos that you can't even explain it to you.
It goes back to
pictures
the
of it. It's-
1600s. So in the 1600s, it was built by the Garzoni family. People now have all kinds of functions there, which is going to be cool. But if we ever go back, we would definitely try to go to a function at the Garzoni Gardens. And anybody that's in that area should go see it. It's really neat.
And they do have a lot. I looked online just recently, and I saw some other festivals that they do in those gardens that would be really cool. So it's definitely something to check out if you're going to be in that area. Check their schedule and their schedule of events and see if there's anything fun to see.
Just happens to be in this town, it's a small town, right? So it's a
Very
one
small.
big long strip, buildings, churches, like little neighborhoods. And this is the town that Carlo Lorenzini, pen name Carlos Collodi, wrote the story about Pinocchio. And there is an actual Pinocchio amusement park there. So if you're bringing kids there and they're into Disney, Pinocchio, there's a Pinocchio amusement park, and it looks very
interesting. We didn't go in.
We didn't go in.
It would be fun for
We weren't
kids.
there for that. And that was our time in Collodi, which is a small town. From there,
So then we moved on to Siena. And this was another one of those amazing experiences that we realized this has to be part of our future travel planning. So many of you, as did we for many years of our life, just a hotel was somewhere to lay your head. Get it as cheap as you can, maybe find it in a good location so it's central.
we're just there to sleep.
We don't think that anymore. So in Siena, we literally stayed in the turret room, 360-degree views of Siena in a 13th century castle.
The castle is still running. It's called Quattro della Torre.
Yeah.
And it is
Four towers.
Four towers. It's about 2 to 3 miles outside of Siena, which is lovely because Siena's got towers and the big tower on their piazza. You get to see all of that from your tower bedroom. You get the whole Siena lit up at night because they light it up like crazy. And you get these gorgeous views of Siena from a distance, not in the town. And you get to hear the cows in the middle of the night mooing and weird animals. We don't know what one of them was. We were a little worried.
Some of them we never figured out. And you are
Hear the birds
awoken in the morning by the roosters.
Roosters. There are no screens. It is window shutters. You're up high enough. You don't have to. There's no bugs. It was lovely and gorgeous. They had to lift our suitcases up with a crane to get them up into the turret. So we weren't hauling these things up
and
the
I
stairs.
think our suitcases almost broke their crane.
Another
They're
note
heavy.
to self:
They're
pack
really
a little
heavy.
lighter.
Yeah, note to self: become backpack people.
But that staying in a unique stay like that in that castle was as cool as anything else about our time in Siena. It was just that fun to be in an old castle in a turret in that moment.
And sometimes a lot of people have asked us, what was your favorite thing from that trip? Well, we just explained to you about Dragut. That was amazing. The Garzoni Gardens, awesome. But honestly, if we had to choose one thing, we probably go back to the castle in Siena. It was such an amazing piece of history. And to be able to live for 3 days in that turret room and, feel like Rapunzel or something, I did tell people that you have to call me Queen now, Queen Julie.
Yeah, because you stayed in
Because
the
I
turret.
stayed in a castle?
Well, and since then, I think there's been 3 or 4 people that we have told about this, and they've actually stayed there. They've been there, either done a cooking class there at the castle, or have stayed in that room. We did the research to know that there's only one turret room. So there's other rooms in the castle, but you really don't want to stay there. You want to stay. If you're going to go do this, stay in the turret. It's a 2-story room. By the way, we're not sponsored by it. We're just telling you that this is that cool of an experience. And multi-level living room on one floor with a bathroom. Then you go up a spiral staircase into a room where the bedroom is a rampart around the wall of the turret with a hollow space down to the living room below. It's really
And
cool.
it's got windows all around, so you can look in
every
every
side.
direction and see the countryside and the farmhouses
We
and the
spent
city.
hours taking pictures.
We actually didn't want to leave.
Yep.
We wanted to stay in the castle, and we thought, man, we should have booked more time so we could spend like an entire day here and see the light at every hour as it hits the different parts around the castle, because it was
Sunrise, sunset,
that
all of it.
beautiful.
It was there, and we booked this in advance. So we knew about this one, so we planned this one. But it was that stay that we go, okay, stays are important. Where you stay and what you're going to sleep in is important. It's not just get a hotel room and then spend your days and go back and crash. No, make this a part of your stay. It's that cool of an experience.
And as we get a little bit older, we appreciate slowing down just a touch more. And it's nice to be able to be in something that is so transformative. It's not like anything we have here. It's
Yeah.
not a normal hotel room. It is so, so, so much cooler.
We weren't even a country when this thing was built and put in place.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So a couple of things. You got to have a car unless you're doing a car service. So there's a couple of clumsy things about staying out in a castle 3 miles outside of town.
And it's not actually as expensive as you might think.
Right? It was the same as hotel rooms in downtown Siena.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, you're paying a premium for those hotels too, so you might as well pay the premium for the outside one. And you wouldn't have to have a car because you could get probably a driver, an
you get a
Uber or
driver,
something.
hire a driver.
But when you're in Tuscany anyway, it's nice to have a car. So
and we did
most
day
people
trips
do.
from there to, all the hilltop towns that we want to go around there. And we're not here to talk about those, but that's the stuff you do when you're staying in a place for 3 nights, you do those day trips. But in Siena, another one of those just awe-inspiring moments is the best piazza in all of Europe, probably, in my opinion, from what we've seen. It's a clamshell city square. It's shaped like a clamshell, and it all flows down to the base of the tower, of the big tower of Siena. And that clamshell is curved, and the stones are so worn over, hundreds and hundreds of years of stones being worn that they're soft. It's like the softest stone. Well, I say it's smooth, but it almost feels soft because everybody lays down. Because when you lay down in this clamshell square, piazza, you are now curved and looking up they get a different color sky at night. It's a really deep blue for sunset.
There's
and the
something
tower,
really crazy about
it is.
that town.
It's unique.
It's this cerulean blue. It's super deep. It's almost indescribable. It's a really, really amazing color. And we asked somebody one night, like, is this a really unusual sky? And they said, nope, it's like this every night. What?
Yep. And then you got the tower, the Siena clock tower in the background, and you just lay there and we're laying on ground that has had lots of foot traffic. We didn't care. It was
I cared a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't care at all. It was just that cool of an experience.
Rick Steves, in his book, which, by the way, I carried his book around like an absolute Bible that whole trip to Italy, said that it's one of the only squares in all of Europe where people sit down and lay down
And lay down on the ground. Yeah. And it feels clean. I don't think it is, but it looked clean.
Speaking of clean, that leads us to our last destination in Rome.
Rome, which is one of our favorite places on the planet. You could go there 100 times and still see stuff new, but we're talking about one specific situation that we had on this trip in Rome.
Yeah, so one of the things that we did there was we found out that you can actually attend an opera, which we had never done before.
Never
and
been to an opera.
Aren't necessarily particularly opera fans.
Don't know squat about operas.
Yeah, don't know squat. But we could attend an opera in the Baths of Caracalla, which they have been around. Well, they were completed in 216 AD.
Yeah.
And this was the most amazing evening. So you pay your ticket and you walk in on a red carpet. You've given a glass of champagne and you sit down while the orchestra is kind of playing some music in the background. But when you look up at the stage is actually the Baths of Caracalla.
Yeah,
and
these are old Roman, big slabs of stone everywhere, 2-3 stories high. It's the old ruins still sitting there.
Yeah. They're
use it as their
functionally
props.
using their ruins. Yeah, so they projected the backdrop of the whole play onto those stones, and it was just spectacular. And throughout the whole opera,
La Bohème.
which we couldn't understand, La Bohème, we couldn't understand it because obviously it was in Italian. I think there may have been some screens on the side where they projected in English, but I don't remember. I didn't even care because
We were watching
I was
what was
taken
on.
in.
Yep.
By the beauty of the production in this ancient place. And for a community to be able to use something like that was spectacular. And so from here on out, we are also planning more trips that take place with things that we can do like this inside ancient forums.
Ancient forums or unique destination concerts. Because we'll go listen to, it might be a really cool concert of a modern artist in a Colosseum or in an old theater or in a Baths of Caracalla. And we were like, we should not just go and just walk around and go to the restaurant and then go back to our room or go out and have cocktails in a bar. Let's have experiences of seeing these destination concerts and unique venues to see these experiences.
Yeah, I will never forget that night. It was spectacular. So these are a few of the things that have happened to us on that trip. Some of them, like I said, we were in the right place at the right time. Other ones were kind of planned out. But our big takeaway was it's the experiences, you guys. You've got to do a little bit of research, figure out what's going on, what kinds of things can you do, could you attend, that are really going to make your trip so much more rich and luxurious.
That changed us. We became massive researchers after that. We now dig in and dig in and dig in. We probably have, on a trip planned of a couple weeks, probably 50 to 100 hours of research. Now, not everybody's going to do that, but that's what we love doing, because we learn all about the things that are happening there. Maybe we don't do them, maybe we do, but we get to find
Gives
out
you
about
options.
And then we plan like crazy for the big events on the days. Not every minute of the day travel, but we get some cool options on the days. So that's how we came to be. Like, we know stuff and we've learned stuff that we want to share. This is one of them. We want to tell you that maybe you can travel differently by doing some of these things and learning about festivals and concerts that you probably don't learn unless you look in advance. Because it's very difficult. It's hard to find the festivals all over different places.
So to wrap it up, thank you for listening to Me and Her Travel. We've got more episodes coming with some exciting destinations.
We're going to be traveling soon to France to be watching the Tour de France and the Olympics. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the future weeks. Maybe one or two podcasts in between that, but because we're going to be over there experiencing it, not necessarily talking about it at that point in time.
And then we'll also give you more updates on how we're hoping to move abroad someday and how that whole process is going.
So thanks again for listening. Click follow and
Wheels up.